Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to episode 10 of Hope at Home on Tour. Tonight, my guest is my old friend and duo partner, Sebastian Knauer. Sebastian, welcome. It's fantastic to have you back. He joined us for 2 episodes back in my living room in Berlin. Tonight, we're not in my living room. We're in a spectacular location in Bonn-Bad Godesberg. It's a suburb of Bonn, and Bonn, of course, is known to you, I'm sure, as the birthplace of Ludwig van Beethoven. And this year, he was due to have a big birthday. He's with us again, as always, tonight, our mascot, accompanying us on this tour. And the whole world was set to celebrate 250 years of Beethoven. Of course, due to this pandemic, many of that has been cancelled or postponed. And so we're particularly happy to be here in the city of his birth and to be celebrating him, remembering him as things gradually begin to open up around the world and especially in Germany. And we're also very fortunate to have the connection to the Beethoven-Haus, the house in which Beethoven was born. It is now the leading institute in the world for Beethoven research. There is a museum there, there is a concert hall, and since the beginning of this year, I'm privileged to be the new president of that society. Over 80 researchers and experts dedicate their life to keeping Beethoven's legacy alive. And it's wonderful to feel their support now together here in Bonn. We are not in his house. We are, in fact, in a location which is known as La Redoute. This was a ballroom. It was built between 1790 and 1792, and it is absolutely spectacular in a beautiful park in Bad Godesberg, just outside of Bonn, or very close, rather, to Bonn. And there is a story to these rooms and these hallowed halls, and that is that Joseph Haydn, the father of composition, we could say, at the time, came here and listened to the young Ludwig van Beethoven. He heard him play, and Beethoven presented himself to Haydn. And it was that meeting that inspired Beethoven to take the journey to Vienna and to change music history forever. We began tonight with a movement from his sonata, Beethoven's Sonata Opus 30, number 1. This is really an amazing piece. It's one of the lesser known of the 10 violin sonatas, the number 6. And it was written, the early sketches, in 1802, at a time where Beethoven had finally given in to this idea of deafness. He wrote his Heiligenstadt Testament the same year, and this sonata was published in 1803, but he began work already at that time, a time of great internal conflict for him. It was also a time of political conflict, and in fact he dedicated this sonata to the Emperor Alexander of Russia, which was quite a bold statement, where Napoleon had in fact taken over here in Bonn and was encroaching upon Europe. Beethoven believed that he should take a stance, a political stance, and in fact he was a deeply political composer. The next piece on our program tonight is by Franz Schubert, and Schubert is also close to Beethoven. He revered the elder composer. He was terrified of him, but he also loved him, and there is a very close connection, and certainly for pianists, the music of Franz Schubert is right up there with all the other immortal gods. And Sebastian, you're going to play now an impromptu by him.
That's right, and thank you very much indeed for having me back again at your wonderful series. And just before I introduce that piece, I wanted to say it's a very, very special feeling today, as you mentioned, to have an audience. And even if it's a very exclusive and small audience, but it's a great feeling to play for people who admire music, who love music. And yeah, since a couple of months, it's really the very first time. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm enjoying it. So the impromptu I would like to play is an impromptu of his 4 pieces of Opus 90, and it's Opus 90 number 3. in G flat major. And at the time when Schubert composed that piece, he was asked to compose that piece in G major because there are so many flats at G flat major that the upper society couldn't play it. But Schubert said either G flat major or nothing. So fortunately, he kept it in G flat major because it makes much more sense. And I really enjoy his music forever, and hope you enjoyed too.
Was an impromptu by Franz Schubert, played by my guest this evening, Sebastian Knauer. And this is coming from the Redoute in Bonn, in Bad Godesberg in Germany, a city, a town which is very closely connected to Ludwig van Beethoven. He was born here 250 years ago, and we are celebrating him and his influences today by playing music by him and music by composers who were either huge admirers of him or felt a close proximity, just like Franz Schubert did. The next composer on tonight's program is Johannes Brahms, and this particular piece that we've selected is a movement from a sonata which is known as the FAE, Frei aber einsam, Free but Lonely Sonata. And if you watched last week from the Planetarium in Berlin, my guest Nick Barr played one movement from that sonata, which was composed by Robert Schumann. And this was a joint effort by different composers as a present for the great Joseph Joachim. And each composer wrote a movement. And we're now going to play the movement which Johannes Brahms composed. It is lightly based on a very famous motive from Ludwig van Beethoven. And I'm sure all of you know this. We all guess what that is, the Fifth Symphony. So this ba-ba-ba-ba is a motive which many composers, of course, have loved and have copied or have paid tribute to in various pieces. And Johannes Brahms takes exactly this motive, or at least the same repetitive three notes, and begins this scherzo with it. So this, in a sense, is Johannes Brahms's tribute to Ludwig van Beethoven. Herzlichen Dank. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. It's really wonderful. You're right, to have an audience again, a real audience full of real people here listening to music and making music. That's what this is all about. The fact that we get to share it with you at home, wherever you're sitting, but also to have this magnificent opportunity to be here in Bonn, to be celebrating Ludwig van Beethoven and his friends and contemporaries, and helping to keep Beethoven happy. As I mentioned beforehand, he's been our mascot. He's been traveling with us wherever we've been. He's usually at home on my piano. He doesn't usually have a mask on, but in these times you can't be too careful. So we hope you're doing okay, Mr. van Beethoven, and we hope you're enjoying the show. That was music by Johannes Brahms, and it was dedicated to Joseph Joachim, who was perhaps one of the finest violinists and musical minds of the 19th century. We'll talk a little bit about him in a minute. Before we do that, we'd like to play one more piece by Franz Schubert, which is one of his songs. And after this rousing music by Brahms, it's something to calm down a little bit. It's called Du bist die Ruhe, or You Are Calmness, by Franz Schubert. That was one of Franz Schubert's most poignant songs, Du bist die Ruhe. You are calmness, you are serenity, you are peacefulness. And peacefulness is something I think we all need right now in the world. Franz Schubert's greatest wish was to be buried close to Ludwig van Beethoven. In fact, he was buried exactly next to him. He was one of the coffin bearers at Beethoven's funeral in 1827, and tragically, he died just 1 year later, still in his 20s, and what an extraordinary loss that was for the music world, and yet we're so grateful that we have this music. The music of Schubert was adored by Joseph Joachim, as was the music of Ludwig van Beethoven. And Joseph Joachim was in fact the very first president of the Beethoven Society. And so it's with enormous trepidation that I try to follow in those footsteps of this grand man, an amazing violinist, a teacher, a pedagogue, a presenter, somebody that changed the way music was presented, programs were made, and he really was responsible for getting together with the citizens of Bonn, this city in which we are, and making a homage to Beethoven, keeping this house alive. And today, now, it is really flourishing as the most important society connected to Beethoven in the world. And I would encourage any of you to go online to the Beethoven House and to look at the digital collections, the manuscripts, the exhibitions, and the numbers of live concerts that take place there in the halls. It's really a unique place, and we hope very much that you can come and visit us. The museum is now open again, and slowly but surely people are starting to come back into cultural institutions, and we hope before too long things will return to at least some kind of normality and we can make music there and celebrate music there. Joachim was also a composer, and we're going to play a piece by him. It's his Opus 2. It was written at the time where he had gone to Liszt. He was, firstly before that, in Leipzig, where he was the concertmaster of the Gewandhaus Orchestra under Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn died very young, and it left a great gap in Joachim's life. And he was searching for a mentor, and he found him in Franz Liszt, the monumental pianist and composer. And he went there to Weimar, where he became the concertmaster there. This was before his time as president of the Beethoven Society. And we're going to play a piece from those early days. It's his Romance, Opus 2. That was music by the first president of the Beethoven Society, Joseph Joachim, played by the current president of the Beethoven-House, Daniel Hope, and my guest tonight is Sebastian Knauer. We are in Bonn-Bad Godesberg, in the Redoute, in an absolutely historic location, somewhere where Beethoven himself played 4 nights a week. Can you imagine that? Probably sitting where Sebastian is right now. Joseph Haydn was here, and then, of course, throughout history, there were many famous banquets and dances. It was a ballroom at one point. At the time, after the Second World War, where Bonn was the capital of Germany, of course, there were many dignitaries and functions here. Princess Diana danced famously here in these rooms. So there's a lot of history, and we feel very privileged that we're able to be here in Bonn to commemorate our birthday man, Ludwig van Beethoven, in his 250th year. We're now going to play a piece by him, and it's one of his most beautiful songs. It's called Ich liebe dich. And even if you don't speak German, I'm sure you know that means I love you. Thank you very much. That was a love song by Ludwig van Beethoven, Ich liebe dich, or I love you, transcription by Sebastian Knauer, my guest, and myself tonight. We are coming now to the end of tonight's episode, coming to you from the Redoute in Bonn, the famous building in which Ludwig van Beethoven performed here many, many times, the building where he met Joseph Haydn. In fact, this building, one could say, started a journey for the history of music, because after the meeting with Haydn, Beethoven was persuaded to follow his destiny and to go to Vienna. And who knows what might have happened had he stayed longer here, even though he was happy here in Bonn and had great success. But Vienna was to become the next destination in his life. And that piece that we just played is a very beautiful piece and a very lyrical piece, and perhaps more somehow introvert than some of the Beethoven you might know. And if one thinks of the figure of Beethoven, the towering colossus of a man, somebody a bit like this gentleman here who's next to me from 1812, this is a very different Beethoven, the one that we just heard. But Beethoven was deeply emotional, deeply political. He was the first composer to really go out on a limb, to be independent, and to think of the idea that men are equal and that everybody has a voice. He was somebody that pushed for change in the world of music, and in a sense he started his own private revolution. The world of music was never the same after Ludwig van Beethoven. He famously said to one of his benefactors, the Count Lichnowsky, Beethoven, there are thousands of counts. There will always be thousands of counts. There is only one Beethoven. And I was on the phone last night to a close friend of mine, talking about the situation in America, and I'm sure many of you have been seeing some of the horrendous images coming out of the United States, and I'm sure many of you are as worried and as upset about some of the images that you've seen, some of the oppression. And last night, in a phone call to a close friend of mine, we got talking about politics, which is always interesting when we start to talk, and he said, why don't we play together, why don't we do something? And this is Mr. Colin Rich. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you, Danny, for having me.
It's wonderful to have you back.
I was born by the river in a little tent, and oh, and just like that river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. And when I go to the movies and I go downtown, somebody's telling me, boy, don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. When I go to my brother, I said, brother, help me please. Oh, yeah, yeah. But he winds up knocking me back on my knees. Oh, sometimes I feel that I won't last for long, but now I feel that I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. But I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I do believe that together we can make this change for a better human race. Together, we can make a change.
Thank you very much, Colin Rich. That was Colin Rich with A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. Colin and I were on the phone last night and we got talking and I said, let's play music. And he came here. A big thank you to Paul Bateman for making this arrangement this morning and getting it ready for us. We've come now to the end of tonight's episode. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Herzlichen Dank, meine Damen und Herren, dass Sie hier waren. A big thank you to the organizers here at the Redoute in Bonn. A big thank you to the Beethoven-Hauses. And as I said, please go online and find out more about this city and more about the Beethoven Society. You can spend hours, even if you can't make it in person, online to find out more about this amazing composer next to me. Tomorrow night, we are traveling east and we're going to be in the town of Dresden. We are going to perform in the Frauenkirche, which is the cathedral, one of the most spectacular cathedrals in the world. And my guests tomorrow night will be the vocal ensemble Amarcord. So please join us then, 6 p.m. Berlin time, 12 noon New York time, 9 a.m. San Francisco, and Yuji-san, whom we both know, and Koji-san in Tokyo, going to bed now. Sleep well, thank you, and God bless. Good night.